Hello, everyone. I am Lori with Behavior Education at Spirit Keeper Equine Sanctuary. Welcome to our discussion for Serpente Sunday for January 17th, 2021. Today, we are going to discuss what is behavior. I realized that the name of my business is Behavior Education, that I talk about behavior in relation to snakes and other animals all the time, and in relation to training. And I mention behavior science a lot, but I've never really explained what behavior actually is. So this is going to be a presentation about what is behavior. Behavior, the word defined. Well, basically that's super easy. Behavior is everything that an animal does. It's everything I do, everything you do. It's everything this snake is doing right now. It's the repertoire of responses from an animal due to changes in its environment. What does that mean? Well, it's just what I said. It's everything an animal does in response to its environment. And the repertoire of behavioral responses that it has available to it is going to depend on things like genetic history, individual behavioral history, and the current conditions. Behavior is a specific response made by an organism to a stimulus, to anything it's in its environment. It's something that happens, that's a stimulus, and then the organism does something in response to it. That's what behavior is. It's those processes by which an animal senses the external world and the internal state of its own body and responds to change which it perceives. And that definition is all the way from 1972. Well, let's break that down a little bit. The processes by which an animal senses the external world, well, that's just how it perceives the world. It's its vision, hearing, touch, smell, taste, chemoreception, thermal reception. Any other way that the animal perceives the world is how it processes information that it encounters in the environment. The internal state of its body, that just means how does it feel? Am I feeling well? What am I capable of doing? That's going to come into play when an organism determines how it's going to respond to something, how it's going to behave. So if I feel threatened, but I don't feel well and I'm not capable of running, then my behavioral response to that threat is probably not going to be to run away. It's going to be something else. How an animal responds when it perceives something in the environment, when it perceives a stimulus, well, that just means it does something. So we're right back here to this definition in the middle that basically is something happens and the animal does something. So where does behavior come from? All right, we know that behaviors are snakes or any animal's response to a stimulus. Well, how does it know to behave? Well, behavior reflects the arrangement of the environment, and it happens, and behavior also changes in response to everything that is around the snake. In other words, the environment makes behavior happen, and it causes behaviors to change. And that starts with random movement within the limits of biology, and then it's refined with the natural process of differential reinforcement. I'm going to explain what all that means. So here we start with random movement within the limits of biology. Let's look at this picture here. It's super cute. It's a little baby corn snake hatching. All it has right now is its biology, what it's hatched with. And it's going to come out of the egg and it's going to randomly start doing stuff. It's going to come out of the egg or it's not going to come out of the egg. And it's going to do these things in response to everything around it. Maybe the texture of the other eggs, the texture of the substrate, the smell of the air, the temperature of the air, the fact that there's another little baby snake right here coming out of another egg. All of those things are going to affect this little baby snake's behavior. It doesn't really know anything yet, and so all it can do is react to its environment based on the limits of its biology. And so it exists, right? We know that. And it's encountering all of these environmental stimuli. And so then it's going to do a behavior. And that behavior at this point is either going to be to come out of the egg or stay in the egg. And there's going to be a consequence to that behavior. And if the snake chooses to come out of the egg, yay, it lives. And it's a little baby corn snake. Well, if it chooses not to come out of the egg, it's not going to live and it dies. So that's what this means when Dr. Friedman defines behavior as starting with random movement within the limits of biology. The animal is born or hatched, and it has its biology. It has the innate things that it's born with, and it's going to just start doing stuff in the environment randomly because it doesn't know any different. Well, its behaviors are then going to be refined by the natural process of differential reinforcement. And that means that behaviors that are appropriate responses to environmental stimuli are going to be reinforced, and those inappropriate behaviors are not going to be reinforced. So in our little example here of our snake existing, being exposed to the environment and then behaving, if this little baby behaves by coming out of the egg, it lives. And so that was an appropriate response. If the baby responds by not coming out of the egg, then that behavior was not appropriate and it's going to die. So that is a very, very black and white and simple way to put this. Basically, natural differential reinforcement means that nature teaches all of us what to do and what not to do. Now, you may have heard the term differential reinforcement in regard to animal training or even human psychology. And usually you're going to hear differential reinforcement of an incompatible behavior or differential reinforcement of an alternative behavior. And that just means that if I don't want my dog jumping on people when they come in the door, that I'm going to teach it to sit instead. And that's differential reinforcement of an incompatible behavior. If the dog is sitting, it can't at the same time be jumping on someone. And differential reinforcement of an alternative behavior means that if my dog normally barks at the vacuum cleaner, I'm going to teach it to sit next to me and get treats instead. And so it's an alternative behavior. Instead of barking at the vacuum cleaner, now the dog runs to me and sits because it's being reinforced with something it finds pleasurable, treats. But what does natural differential reinforcement mean? It means literally that nature teaches. The snake avoids a predator, it survives. It learns to avoid predators. The snake fails to avoid the predator and it is injured or dies. So it either doesn't have the opportunity to repeat that behavior or it learns from its mistake and next time it avoids the predator. A snake might climb up high off the ground and hide and be safe. So nothing's now going to eat it or harm it. Or the snake might choose to remain on the ground out in the open and get stepped on, get eaten, get injured. All sorts of things could happen. And so either that snake is not going to have the opportunity to repeat that behavior of remaining on the ground because it's dead, or it's going to be injured and survive, and it's going to learn that it's safer to climb up into a high spot and hide where it is safe. And all of this just means that behaviors that result in good outcomes are going to be maintained or repeated, and behaviors that result in bad outcomes will happen less frequently or not be repeated at all. Why? Because learning happens. So our snake exists. Here he is existing. He encounters stimuli. He encounters the environment and everything in the environment. And he chooses a behavior. This snake has chosen to climb up and coil in a moss hide. The consequence of that behavior is that he is safe. He's probably warm because it looks sunny in this picture. Maybe things come by that he could eat, like baby birds or little baby lizards or amphibians. And so it's a pretty good situation for him, and he learns from that, and that behavior is likely to be repeated. If he doesn't do that and he remains on the ground and something injures him, he's going to learn not to repeat that behavior. So the consequence of remaining on the ground might be injury, or he might be afraid of something, or he might be too cold. And so that behavior is not going to be repeated. Whereas the behavior of being safe and warm up in this hide will be repeated because it had a good outcome. So nature teaches and learning happens. It's natural. It's natural for us. It's natural for snakes. It's natural for every organism. It's just something that happens. It's the way that we were born. Organisms were born to behave and they were born to learn. Because if learning didn't happen, we wouldn't survive very long. So learning happens naturally all the time. Learning is behavior change due to circumstances and experiences as a result of how we behave when faced with those circumstances. And if learning did not occur, snakes would not survive very long. So they hatch and they learn, or they're born and they learn. They learn where to find food, water, shelter, suitable climates. They learn how to avoid predation, how to reproduce, how to thermal regulate, and anything else that's necessary for their survival and reproduction, they learn throughout their lifetime. So the ability to learn allows snakes to adapt to the demands of changing environments, and it allows them to adapt to changing circumstances throughout their entire lifetime. They never stop learning unless they are faced with a situation that they cannot control. If they are faced with circumstances that they are unable to cope with or control, then they can enter a state of learned helplessness, at which time they are no longer able to learn. So why do we care? Why do we care at all about what behavior means or how it works? We care because knowledge of how behavior works is critical for behaviorists, for trainers, for keepers, for welfare scientists, for veterinary staff, for all caregivers, including pet owners, in understanding and assessing animal welfare, in supporting successful integration of animals into human-controlled environments. That includes helping our snakes integrate into living with us in our house, and in avoiding misunderstandings with animals, and that includes other people. If we have a good understanding of behavior, we can avoid a lot of miscommunication and misunderstandings, not only with our animals, but with other humans as well. As always, here's a list of resources that I got this information from, and you are welcome to look these things up on your own. In fact, I encourage you to look these things up on your own. And thank you very much for joining me today. I always appreciate people wanting to learn. Please remember to always be kind and love your animals.